This episode of Leaders in Transformation, a series dedicated to shining the spotlight on those leaders that are successful in leading our agile and DevOps adoptions and digital transformations. It's by no secret or accident that we've been failing for over a decade and we continue to fail, even though we know the path forward. And that's why we created this series to provide you the insight and demystify how to succeed with your adoption and transformation. Our guest today is Tom Geraghty. Tom is the founder of Interim Limited, an organization dedicated to organizational learning. He's also the founder of SiteSafety.com. The way I think about this is I've never met anybody more passionate and dedicated to psych safety or psychological safety as Tom. Tom, welcome to the show and thank you for being our guest today.
Thanks so much, John. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm really pleased to be here.
Yeah, is there anything you'd like to expound upon our audience about yourself or your work before we dive into things?
Yeah. So I'll do the brief intro, the brief version.
Yeah.
So my original background after school and stuff was in ecological research. That was my passion, and I spent a few years doing ecological research in various settings, and then got into technology and began managing. In fact, I started off in ops and engineering and infrastructure engineering, and then began managing teams, managing software engineering teams, DevOps teams, and over that journey, ended up as CIO and CTO of various firms, including like big financial enterprise, global enterprise, and small hyperscaling startups, and it was through that whole sort of journey
Yeah.
that I became really passionate about. So I became passionate about creating the conditions in which teams can thrive. What's the substrate? What's the foundation of team performance? And it was sort of 6 or 7 years ago that I came across the term psychological safety, and that was my light bulb moment. That was the moment where it was like, really like, this is the word for all the stuff I've been trying to do, and it was incredible. And that was when I was able to then really sort of put it, like, compartmentalize it all, hang it on a hook, and say, this is the stuff we're trying to do, and this is how it all works, and open up all the other interesting doors. And that was sort of my journey up to that point, and now I'm a professional psychological safety geek for a living.
No, this is great. It reminds me so much of myself in transformational leadership. I remember that light bulb moment when I was in the MBA class, and I wrote about this in my books. Right, it's you get that epiphany, and that's what drives you, and that's why we want you here and dive into this with you. Is really, again, I've never met anybody as into this as you. So let's go ahead and jump into the success part. Is you've been successful. You know what success is. So the way I'd like to play with this is let's consider me either I'm that leader that's been 2 decades leading and doing things that people haven't done, and you know in that, or I'm this new person, got my first leadership role, or maybe I'm in that mid-level in the trenches in that that scrum master, project program leader, initiative leader type thing. So from that, how would you help me, how would I know that I'm being successful with psych safety? What does that feel like? What does that look like to myself and the people that I'm leading?
I think, yes, it's a great question, because I think it's worth sort of making explicit. Like, we kind of know this, but psychological safety itself isn't the goal, right? We're not,
Right.
like, that's not the thing we're trying to do. The thing we're trying to do is build great products, or save lives, or fly planes, or whatever it is we're doing. That's our goal. But psychological safety is a necessary factor, a necessary part of the environment that we create in order to achieve that goal. Um, so so in that sense, there are some indicators that certainly tell us if we're in a psychologically safe environment or not. And some of those indicators are, how often are people asking for help? How often are people admitting mistakes? How often are people challenging the way we're doing things, or suggesting new ideas of changing the way we do things, or an entirely new idea? In fact, how often are people suggesting unformed or incomplete ideas? Because that's a really good indicator of psychological safety. Because yeah, we in fact, so you mentioned sort of the manager who's been around 20, 30 years or something like that, and there's a lot that we need to unlearn about leadership, and
Yep.
particularly over the past century. And one of those things, we often hear, I'm sure you've heard it, the phrase, "Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions."
Yep.
And of course, that's great. Like, and it comes from a really good place. And so much of management and leadership, some of these lessons come from really good places, and they're very well intentioned. They're well intentioned. They're meant to empower people. They're meant to help people come up with great ideas, and not just come and complain about something. But actually, what that what that can end up with, if we ask people to only come with solutions and not problems, is that they won't tell us the problems, because if they can't think of a solution, or if they can only think of some unformed or imperfect solution, then they might not come to us with it at all. And then, of course, we're not finding out about the bad news. We need to hear the bad news because it's there, it exists. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is the point that in many cases, being a manager or a leader in a psychologically safe environment is becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable, because we may have created environments that, yeah, we achieved a lot and we were high performing, but people maybe didn't challenge us. People didn't challenge our own concepts of, or the way we did things, and people didn't tell us we were wrong, and people didn't tell us that bad things were happening, or people didn't tell us the mistakes. And so we're happily getting on with things, thinking we're doing great, but in fact, there's all this stuff hidden in the background that we don't know about, all these bubbling away concerns and issues, or the great ideas that never get brought to the table. And so getting comfortable being uncomfortable is a huge part of creating psychological safety as a manager, as a leader, because typically management, maybe it's been the other way around for a little while.
No, no, I totally agree. And I'm just cracking up and grinning because what I learned that was I was on a submarine, U.S. fast attack submarine in the middle of the ocean, and the lieutenant, I came to the lieutenant at 2 o'clock in the morning and woke him up. He said, "Petty Officer Rupel, you better be coming to me with a solution and not just a story, right? A problem." So yeah, I totally, totally get that what you're talking about there. And where I'm thinking of this is if we think about it iteratively, so from an iterative perspective, what was coming to mind for me was, and I was self-realizing while you were talking, was this is really, if we think about our dynamic ways of working or iterative ways of working, this is really an iteration, right? I'm coming, the initial seed or initial I, that idea, whatever the problem, like you're saying, bringing forth the problem, even if it's incomplete. I never thought about it that way. Is hey, it's half baked, and we're used to bringing things fully baked or full. And can I feel comfortable coming to my leader knowing, or I'm not going to get my head chewed off, or I'm not going to get yelled at for bringing them something that's incomplete. So that's a
That's
very important part. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly it. And in fact, so much about psychological safety and the conditions that both create and are created by psychological safety are about creating the conditions where people can iterate, experiment, and learn. Because
Hmm.
we like to say in the field, in the community of psychological safety, we like to say that the outcome of work shouldn't be the work. It shouldn't be the thing we're trying to make. It should be learning how to do it better next time,
Yep.
because that's continuous improvement. And even if we've got someone on an operating table and we're trying to save their life, yes, we're trying to save their life, but it's almost even more important that we get better and learn from this time, because we've got 50, 100, 1,000 more lives to save in the future, and we need to do those better. So the the primary focus should be learning how to do it better, and you can only do that through iteration, because you're not going to
Mhm.
get from 0 to 100 in one step.
Right.
You've got to go
Right.
through all the little steps and changes in between, and some of them not always going to be forward. Some of them are going to be forward 2 steps and back three, or so. We need to make sure that we've embedded and created conditions in which we can learn from those little
Yeah, and I
steps
like
forward and the missteps. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I like the conditions, right? That you've mentioned conditions several times, so our hope audience is picking up on this. Is that the audience, the conditions part, right? And we get into positive conditions or negative conditions that we think that way, and that ties into a whole bunch of others, changing our style of leadership and all that good stuff from transactional, transformational, all that stuff. So, is there a point in time where, from the success perspective, where you as a leader, or if you're a uh, resource in an environment that's uh, I'll say successful, you know that, okay, we got this. Yes, we've achieved this. What does that moment feel like, or what's some indicators of that? You've, even though there may be craziness and chaos going on around us, for whatever reason, you feel like, you know what, this isn't, we got this. What is that in the psych world? Psych safety world? How does that? Is there? Could you describe that moment for people?
Do you know what I think it's probably almost impossible to describe, but it's one of those things that you'll know it when you see it or when you feel it. Um, it's I guess it's probably like one of those things like falling in love or something. Like you try and describe what it is,
Right.
you almost can't, but you will know when you're getting it right. And uh, and equally, I think it's worth recognizing that there isn't like a final destination. There isn't like a point where you can say we've done it. We can stop now. We can like we've ticked that box. We can go back to the old ways of hierarchy and command control and punishing people for mistakes, and we can do all that stuff that I used to like doing. And
Right.
it's a long term commitment to improvement and reflection and we're not going to get it right all the time and you will know it when it's good, and maybe those moments when it's good are the times to really take a good look in this is the nature of psychological safety, right? Because it's in those times when you've got a really psychologically safe environment where people feel free to be candid, open, and almost and challenge you and present you with information that maybe you feel really uncomfortable hearing. But it's in those moments that are the really true, like maximizing learning potential moments. And so it's in those moments when we feel like we've really got this. This is we're humming. We're really performing as a team.
Yep.
Those are the moments when you need to come together and be like, okay, we're doing well. What can we do even better? Because it's in those moments that you can really maybe take the big leaps forward.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. And thank you for sharing that. That's I'm just, as you're talking, I'm going back to my own experiences, right? And
Mm.
you're right. It's how do you describe this, right? And that's the challenging part. So we've talked about success. So let's look at adversity a little bit here. So when you're that leader, and let's say, this reminded me of our conversation when I first met you. You were telling me about when you first, I think you said it was in 2017, you were on stage at a conference and brought the term out, psychological safety or psych safety. And at that point, so being that icebreaker, being that leader with the courage and commitment, what I call the two C's, to get out there and do it for your organization, or being that follower that maybe from the bottom up is willing to ask that question and be vulnerable to a leader, and then have that leader self realize on their actions. Maybe they won't get it right the first time, but that experience of not getting right is the catalyst so that next time they're ready to for you to come back to them. Maybe getting their empathy out, or consideration, or how, whatever words you want. How does that? How does that? How do you deal with the adversity, or how do you recommend for leaders or people to deal with the adversity of getting this in place?
Yeah, well, that's a good point because there, we do get pushback and there's we get pushback on the idea of psychological safety in a number of different ways. We sometimes get sort of pushback in that sort of it's not. Sometimes people don't believe it's real even, or it's just
Hmm.
like not a thing, or maybe it's
Wow.
unnecessary. Sometimes
Wow.
sometimes people believe we shouldn't need it. Like there's a sticky belief sometimes in some realms of leadership and management that people should just speak up. People should just have the courage to say the thing or do the thing or
Right.
challenge something. But actually, if you look at, I mean, there are so many examples. There's loads of examples from my experience as well. But there were some really huge ones. Things, if you look back at example, like a lot of aviation disasters, right? A lot
Hmm.
of aviation disasters. In fact, this is a whole sort of the catalyst behind cockpit resource management and CRM stuff, where people didn't speak up because say I think there's one case where the captain there was an engine problem and the captain had cut off the fuel to the wrong engine, and
Hmm.
so
Oh
they were
wow.
going to crash. Like this was a obviously this was a life or death situation, but
Yeah.
and yet people still didn't speak up because of this really steep power hierarchy between them and the person they need to speak up to. In this case, the pilot, the captain, and the point is that psychological safety is so, or the absence of it is so strong
Hmm.
that we may not speak up, even in cases where our own life is at risk.
Wow.
And that, I mean, it sounds almost absurd, but
Yeah,
it's
it's mind
but it's
blowing.
true. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's that's the world we live in, and so to
Huh.
sort of to say people should just speak up, people should just do it. It's not enough. We need, like you, back to the start. We need to create the conditions in which people feel safe to speak up.
Yeah, and what you're hitting on there is just reflecting is, some of our past episodes of Leaders in Transformation, the past leader, we've our guests, they've talked about that the how hard it is, the adversity of them as a leader to get that in place. And so they're a senior level leader in the organization, but yet they're responsible to the board of directors for the fiduciary responsibilities, right? And stock price and all that. And so their people are coming to them, making mistakes, learning, failing fast, all those good things we talk about. Yeah, team, go, go, go. But yet they got this pressure coming down from above. And so as that leader, they find themselves in that precarious position where it's like they have to make a choice. Do I stand up for my people? So how did anything there that you tips or tricks that so let's say I'm coming to you for help. Hey Tom, help. I'm I'm in this position. How could you help me in that?
Yeah, I think we need to recognize the incentives and sort of reward structures and goals that people are facing and people are under. We often don't address that. So when we talk about the systems and the conditions in which psychological safety can exist and thrive, we sometimes forget that there are loads of environmental and systemic structures and things in place. Some of those structures are things like shareholders.
Hmm.
If as even as CEO, we might think, there's a saying, isn't there? It's the culture of a company is a shadow of the CEO.
Yeah.
So the CEO sort of sets the tone for the organization, and that's true. But the CEO has got a bunch of people in a room somewhere that they meet every quarter or something that they have to answer to, and they might not be people who particularly buy in to progressive, generative, or humanistic leadership, and so you we should recognize that almost no one in an organization is immune to these systemic um, nudges in certain directions, and so
Hmm.
we have to recognize that we must recognize that, and that no one operates within a vacuum, I guess,
Yeah.
and yeah, we need to be, yeah, kindness should go up and down and across and sideways, and that empathy, we should have that empathy for everyone.
Omnidirectional is what's coming to my mind.
Omnidirection, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Omnidirectional.
yeah,
Yep. No, that's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
So we've touched upon, so we went, success, adversity, we touched upon a little bit about, we're talking about fail. You mentioned failure there. So again, let's go to full on failure, right? So I've and I I'm just some nightmares are coming to mind right now speaking to you. But what what is that like? Again, I'm that leader. I'm coming to you and your team for help. My organization, there's zero empathy, zero, it's a total failure in this area. You know, how can what tips or tricks, is there anything there that you could help me in my organization? How would I plant those seeds, or what can I do to turn this around?
So yeah, well, that's a good question. So I think so in that case, so what we would normally do is try and find out what the tacit goals of the organization are,
Yep.
um, and you know, if in a sense, every organization is different, but also every organization is the same. The and in a way, I sometimes frame organizations as sitting on somewhere on a spectrum. And at one
Hmm.
end, you've got sort of the big successful organizations that are making a lot of money, doing really well, and they're primarily focused on not losing money or not losing data or things not going wrong.
Yeah.
And that includes things like healthcare and things like that as well.
Okay.
And at the other, you know, and at this end of the spectrum, we've got organizations, say startups, but essentially businesses innovating, trying out new things. An organization searching for a business model, just trying to like experiment and iterate as
Figure it
quickly as
out. They're
possible.
figuring it out.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they're figuring it out. Now, if so psychological safety is the foundation of both of these endeavors.
Hmm.
Psychological safety allows us to prevent and mitigate disasters and things going wrong because we find out about mistakes, we put in practices, procedures, and checklists and things to stop them happening or mitigate them happening. And at the other end of the spectrum, psychological safety is the thing that allows us to surface incomplete ideas and suggest ideas and try out new things and define what's safe to fail and what isn't safe to fail, and therefore what's safe to try and not safe to try. And and so we so what I'm coming to is that because psychological safety is the foundation for all of this success, it doesn't matter what kind of organization you are. Psychological safety is one of the things that we is a necessary factor for resilience and success. But if we use the wrong message with if we talk to these people over here about failing fast and innovating and trying new things and getting things to market quickly and learning, then it's not going to land. Like it's that doesn't make sense. And the same with the other way around. You don't speak to a hyperscaling startup founder and say, here's all the things you have to make sure we don't go, that don't go wrong and like avoid mistakes. Like, no, I'm just trying to I'm trying to fail fast. I've got only this amount of money. I've got like 4 months funding left. So let's try something. So,
Right.
um, so a lot of it comes down to that, and then that what the organization is trying to achieve will then steer the practices, mechanisms, behaviors. A lot of the behaviors will be the same, but a lot of the practices and way we implement those things will be quite different in these different types of organizations. The structures and how we implement them will be different. I hope
Okay.
I've answered that question.
Yeah, no, no, you have. And what came to my mind was so much about, I'm going to say it this way is Mick Kirsten, project to product, right?
Mm,
And then cost-based versus uh, product-based or value-based, right? And so you get into value streaming and thinking
yeah,
about flowing value to your customer. That's the one I've, personally, that's the one I like is I think that regardless of what environment and what I'm really like here about what you're saying is that if I'm in an organization and I just think about it from the sense of whether I'm that leader at the top or somewhere in the middle or just somebody just in the trenches making it happen. How is my contribution flowing to the value to the customer? And then add that layer of psychological safety in there. That's the foundation for that flow to be successful. That's the visualization that I had in my mind as you were talking. So that's what came
yeah,
to mind. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And in fact, we're actually doing quite a lot of work on handoffs and stuff at the moment, which is exactly that sort of
Ah,
flow of value, right? But and in the tech world, we talk about handoffs and sort of value stream
yeah.
flowing from the idea into and it's only really realized until it's in the hands of the customer.
Yeah.
But the same concept, though we wouldn't necessarily call it value, but the same concepts apply in aviation and in healthcare, right? Because a
Yeah. Yeah.
patient
Exactly.
arrives in a hospital, there are handoffs between different teams, different departments, different services, um, and and there is value or knowledge or data or information or even care lost or gained maybe through those handoffs. And so the concept of value is, you wouldn't call it value in healthcare necessarily, but there's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
there's a there's a stream, and a key point here is that psychological safety in those handoffs is absolutely crucial. We don't necessarily see it so much in technology because we try to have cross-functional product teams that can kind of take something from start to finish.
Right. Right.
But in other domains that doesn't happen simply by necessity. Um, there are handoffs, and so we have to make sure that we foster psychological safety between teams, between people when a handoff occurs, because otherwise we lose information, we lose context, and certainly in something like healthcare, that could result in disaster for that patient if some small but crucial piece of information is not transmitted, or even or a mistake isn't raised, or an issue isn't raised. So yes, psychological safety is such a key component to so many parts of how we interact in organizations.
Yeah, and it's when you were speaking there, I got really silent inside because I was really intentfully listening. And to me, that what you said there is really so important. It just it I'm thinking of, the value stream mapping exercise and stuff when we're working with clients is that handoff, the baton handoff, right? How many relay races, how many gold medals have been lost? This is when somebody that taught was teaching me this. They said, how many gold medals were lost because of the baton handoff, right? It's the same thing. It's the same conceptually. It's the same. So that's how I see it. And again, layering
Exactly.
in the way that you're bringing to light and to share with all of us how we can think about this. To me, it's awesome. So again, thanks for this is great. So let's go along that line, right? So this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? Transformations are, and so there's going to be lots and lots of handoffs, not only for a week or a month, but for into years, right? I mean, changing holistically, changing some of these big corporations, it takes 3 to 5 years for a culture change to really get brought in and permeated and over to, you hit that critical mass, and then okay, then it even takes time to scale out the rest of it. So from a persistence standpoint, how does how do you maintain this enthusiasm? I'm gonna, your passion, enthusiasm yourself. I'm just curious for you. How do you keep it up? Working, you see all this going on. What's your secret?
That's a good question. I think my secret is just being an absolute geek about this stuff. But so passion and enthusiasm count for a lot, I think. But also,
Mhm.
I think perseverance is an interesting word, because in a marathon, if you're running in a marathon, you persevere. You've just got to keep going. To quote the great Nemo, you've just got to keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
Yep.
But in a digital transformation, or other transformation in any organization, we perseverance doesn't mean just doing the same thing and keeping on doing it. It means continuously improving. It
Mm,
means constantly, continuously improving. And just to come back to the iteration thing, constantly iterating and improving and learning from what we're doing before, because fundamentally that is digital transformation. You don't, as we know, and I'm sure we've talked about this on these sorts of things before, where you don't do a digital transformation by creating a big Gantt chart at the on day one, and then just flowing, just going through the Gantt chart, and then at the end of year 5 going, that's that done.
yep.
um, it's an iterative, agile, adaptive process, and we've got to learn from what's going on, and things are going to change during the way. And halfway through the transformation, COVID or something will happen, and that will either accelerate you or move you forward. But
Right, right.
yeah, um,
Do you
so
have a
so go on.
no? Keep going. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly the point. Like perseverance is fundamentally, I think, about adaptation and continuous adaptation and improvement, and that's what enables you to persevere.
Okay. Okay, got it. Yeah, so my excitement got there when you were talking. So here's what I'm thinking is, do you have a story or something about, like, let's say I'm that leader, or again, somebody in an organization that, it's not working. What do you have? Yeah, do you have a? Could you share with us how somebody turned it around? Like how a leader got fed up and said, you know what, I'm going to make the, or whatever the situation was. Share. Can you share with us something there about, somebody making it happen?
So I can think of, this might not be the best example, but it's what came immediately to mind when, so I was head of tech at a large sort of live events venue, and we were trying to improve. We're constantly trying to improve. We're
Yeah.
constantly trying to do things better. And one of the things, this was fairly early on in my management career. One of the things that I did was begin to measure the tickets closed sort of tickets closed and things done by all the members of the team. So
Yep.
using Jira and other ticketing systems are available. Like recording and then doing an end of week sort of not a I should like not a leaderboard. I wasn't ranking people in terms of who did what, but just displaying, just having that data on a board
Hmm.
with the different names of different people and sort of how many things they'd done that week or closed that week. And and I thought this would be a great way to just nudge productivity up a little bit, right?
Okay.
No, 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 no,
Really?
no. Terrible idea. Terrible idea.
Okay.
Initially, of course, it looked like a great idea. Over the next few weeks and months, the numbers began to increase and things were looking, trajectory was good, velocity was up, all of this stuff. Then as you start diving into it, you realize that because even just an implicit nudge in that direction, we weren't scoring people, it wasn't a leaderboard, we weren't bonusing people or anything
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
Just because that data was available, people began to, even in slightly small ways, they would pick the smaller, more easily achievable task over the higher impact but slightly more difficult task, right?
Okay.
And then and you'd also see some cases where people might log a ticket and close a thing for something that a couple of weeks ago would have just been something they'd have done anyway, but
Yep.
they took some extra time to log and close a ticket because that meant it would nudge their number up a little bit. And so no one was trying to game the system.
Yep.
This wasn't sort of deviant behavior or anything like that. This was just natural human behavior in
Yep.
response to a stimulus. And so what I realized was even though I wasn't scoring people, I was incentivizing individualistic behavior, um, even on an unconscious level. And so I stopped doing that and instead went back to showing what we'd achieved as a team outcome, what we'd achieved together, and that was the move. That was the successful move because that then began to re-enable things like glue behaviors, the behaviors where someone would help someone else achieve their goal, maybe at their own expense, but because what this person was trying to achieve was had a bigger impact than what they were currently working on. And so the team outcomes improved. The metrics may have actually dipped after that, but the outcomes improved.
No, that's very and where you took me there was the subtleness, right? Is
Mm.
how subtle this can be, and team, right? Team versus individual. So this reminds me of how we used to introduce sports players because I think the business world follows sports champions. Some of those behaviors, a good game, uh, and so that is, they used to announce individuals. Hey, here's your person, here's person B, and they go through all the names, and then the rest of the team would follow. And today it's more like, here's your team, and the whole team runs out together, and the crowd goes wild, right? So to me, that and then that's what came to mind. And then the subtleness, though, that's what really you've got me intrigued and thinking now for my next transformation is look for those subtleties, and that's really like that whisper, right? And really just okay. No, no,
Yeah,
thank you for sharing. That's a
yeah, yeah. And in fact, yeah, you've just made me think of something as well. So because the the world of psychological safety is an interesting world because we touch on so many other interesting domains. We touch on human factors and ergonomics. We touch on
mhm,
safety science, um, and resilience and organizational dynamics and psychology and loads of other things. One of there's a concept in safety called weak signals.
okay.
It is usually termed weak signals of failure, which are those really subtle little signs that may otherwise get ignored. And I think weak signals can be interpreted in another way as well. And we can see the weak signals of failure on the horizon, maybe emanating from a system, some sort of otherwise, if there's a trace log that's showing some sort of something that's a little bit awry, but we wouldn't normally bother looking at it, but
Hmm.
maybe it's worth just sort of opening it up and having a look. But we can also think about weak signals as in those very faint nudges, those subtle nudges in behavioral direction, because over say a 5 year period over a digital transformation project, those subtle nudges can become a a great force. So we need to really think about what they are, what which ones we're creating intentionally, and which ones we're creating unintentionally as well.
Right, right. No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So where I want to go with this now is so paying it forward, right? So with our audience here, we have, senior leaders, and then we have, leaders that are just now on their start of their leadership career, or even aspiring leaders, right? Is, hey, I want to improve my leadership. So thinking it from that perspective, again, you've had a tremendous impact globally on leadership around the world with this. So what is there anything like for yourself? What can you think back? Is there a story or something you can share with a point in your career where you said, "Okay, this is I need to go down here," or "This is what made me who I am today," or "This is where, like, you know what, I can be successful with this, and so this is how I'm going to go forward with this." What How did you get to where you're at today? If somebody wants to become the next Tom, right, or just following your steps, what does that feel like or look like?
So, when you started to ask that question, I was immediately thinking about some of the shall I say bad things that have happened in my career that have sort of led me towards this point. Because, and I think sometimes, what am I trying to say? I think in a sense, we can learn really well from failure. We can learn from success, right? But we can learn
Yep.
really effectively from failure. There's a lot we can learn from failure. Um, and some of my biggest lessons have been through failure, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, but and I can think of one example where I can think of a technological example where I accidentally brought production down for a few thousand people, and it was only 5 minutes, but it felt like forever. And you know and so you learn a lot of lessons from that, right? You learn a lot
Right,
of
right.
lessons from that. And I've also learned from failure. I've learned from interpersonal failure
Okay.
when I've been managing a team, and I've said the wrong thing to someone, or I haven't thought deeply enough about how I'm managing this situation or this context, or maybe I haven't listened. Maybe I've been really busy and I haven't listened to someone's concern deeply enough, or given them enough attention at that moment, and then in hindsight, of course, hindsight is 2020. You know, and what I guess what I'm saying is, the interpersonal ones are, so they're harder to shift, and we kind of carry that with us forever. We can learn from the technical failures and think, right, well, we can do all these things, and we can avoid doing that again. But the interpersonal failures stick with us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
agree. And I'm feeling some of thinking back myself is okay. Yeah, you're right. I remember what I said this comment to the team, and they came back to me and said, "John, I know you meant this in a good way, but we didn't it didn't come across that way, Dodd. We internalized it this way." So then it went on, and
yeah,
and then I had to rebuild that trust over the next couple days. It took days to get back, and it wasn't a big thing, but like you said, it was small. So where this one is too, it reminded me of a conversation we had just as we were preparing for the show. And it was, we always talk about psychological safety for the organization and the team, but where is psychological safety for those leaders, right? And the top leaders
mm,
or the
mm,
top people that are being paid, big salaries or incentivized, huge incentives, whatever, to make this thing happen. And we're human. We're all vulnerable, right? We all have our
yeah.
day. And so that to me, I guess, is where how does that work? Or what advice can you give to organizations and people out there that to address just those super high performers or those the people everybody's counting on to pull them through, and what does psych safety mean for them, or how do we provide that to those folks that we all
Oh,
aspire and look up to?
yeah, yeah, and exactly. So I think, and for many of us, our experience and our perception of people like the CEO, for example, is that they feel really safe. They feel super psychologically safe, because if we're having a meeting and they walk in the room and sit down at the table, we're all like, holy, there's someone in the room who could literally just like end my career like that if I said the wrong thing.
Okay.
That's the little bit of at the back of our brain is going. So we might instinctively feel like they're super psychologically safe. No harm can come to them. No interpersonal harm. But actually, if you look at C-level execs, teams of, executive teams, senior leadership teams, they're often psychologically unsafe, or at least they could be a lot better. And often that's because of the dynamics involved at that level are often quite competitive dynamics. The CEO is kind of punting for the CEO's job. The CFO is in competition with someone else,
Right.
and it's and there's a lot of difficult dynamics at that level, because in some ways they certainly should be a team, but in many ways they're not a team. In many ways they're pulling in different directions, and they've got very competitive dynamics going on. So we should recognize that, and we can do what we can to try and mitigate that. And there's a lot of work we can do to make sure that they are all pulling in the same direction, and we can do some exercises around trust and openness, and try and improve that environment. But at the same time, it's the real world. We can't fix everything. So
Mhm.
another suggestion that I always make, particularly for people at a very high level, at an exec level, is, have a coach, have a mentor. In fact, have multiple coaches and mentors that 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 you can speak to, that you can go to, that you can offload to, and who can help you frame what's going on in more productive and generative ways, because it can be really tough at the top.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there used to be a saying, or there is a saying, leadership is a lonely place,
Yeah,
and then our more progressive. I know you use the term progressive. In my vocabulary, I think of that as transformational, right? Transactional versus
yeah,
transformational. And so the more, and then the dynamic is the one I'm trying to work with people on, is think about dynamic, being dynamic, leading dynamic, all that stuff. And those ways of thinking and doing, yeah, it's not that loneliness as a leader sort of gets, it's not as much as it used to be in the past. But to your point, what I'm learning from you is that you're going to, as that person, that whether it's the best engineer, right, that everybody's counting on to come through, or you're the best program manager out there, that hey, you can herd all the animals together, herd all the craziness, or make bring order to chaos as you do that. Create, if you're not getting it for your organization, or it's not there, then go create it for yourself with a trusted group. That to me is the message I'm taking
yeah,
away from this.
yeah.
Because you're right. Now that I'm thinking about this, is yeah, there may be organizations that this is not going to happen, that they're not going to have that
Mm,
culture. It's not going to be at the culture right now, maybe in the future, but right now when I need it, it's
yeah,
not there.
yeah,
That's what I'm
yeah.
learning from you right now. That's what you're teaching me.
And yeah, in fact, that's a fantastic point, because psychological safety is an emergent thing. It comes out of the work that you put in 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, or someone else did, and so, exactly like you say, sometimes when you need it, it's not there, and we have to acknowledge that, at least, and part of that means having some people, whether that's professional people like a coach or mentor, or friends, family, colleagues, that we can lean on when and if we need to. Yeah,
Because I heard you say trust, right? It's all about being vulnerable and trust and
yeah,
open.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Who
yeah,
can I do that with, right?
yeah,
So what I want to do is have some fun with this. Is okay. So let's say that psychological safety is Superman. What is the kryptonite of psychological safety? Like for yourself, even yourself, what is your kryptonite? Like what is the downfall that just you just like, you have a tough time with it, or it's really hard? What if I'm trying to do psychological safety? What's the kryptonite there? What's going to be that thing that's going to undermine or really be hard to overcome or
oh
take on?
wow, yeah. So this is actually one of the exercises that we do in some of our workshops. we
Oh,
actually we
okay.
actually get everyone together, and we kind of brainstorm, okay, what are all the things that we could do to create a culture of fear? How could we
Oh,
completely
okay.
destroy psychological safety? How could we create a culture of fear and make everyone afraid to speak up? And do you know what? Every time, say I've got a group of 10 people, we might come up with like 100 different things. And
Yep.
then in the next workshop, there's 100 more things.
Yep.
So there are so many things, but some of the core things that, it's worth making the point that if we were to criticize someone's idea in public, really criticize it, really pull it apart and critique it,
Yep.
um, that's going to, at least that's probably going to make them wary of suggesting an idea next time. If
Okay.
someone asks for help, and or if someone says, "Oh, I don't know what that acronym means," and the boss says, "You should know that by now," then
Okay.
good luck getting. In fact, good luck getting them to ask that in the future. Ask a question in the future. Good luck getting anyone else in the room to ask something in the future because
Yeah, you
they've
just
all seen. Yeah, they've all seen that.
right. I don't want to be that. You just broadcasted. You just broadcasted your intent of that leader,
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right, so let's flip that, right? So let's go and flip it around then. So what's the best qualities, or how do you, the superpower of psychology, or that piece of it? Yeah, how's that work out, or how does that feel?
yeah, yeah. So I really like. I heard Amy Edmondson say years ago that one of the best ways to create psychological safety is to pretend it already exists, and I think acknowledging that this requires some privilege, some sort of privilege or something as a let's say as a leader. So let's say you might be a leader in your team. You might not be a leader, but maybe you've been on the team a long time, so you've got that sort of status. Um, and so if you've got any sort of privilege on a team, whether that's tenure, experience, hierarchy, or whatever it is, then model the things that you would expect to hear when there is psychological safety. So admit mistakes, admit when you're wrong, tell people
Yeah,
about past mistakes you've made, tell people about the really big tire fires that you've created, and when you brought down production, and you're
right,
still here, like you're still here to tell the tale, because
right,
particularly as junior people in a team, I think early on in our careers we're particularly guilty of thinking, if I make a mistake, that's it, I'm done, like my career's
right,
over, you know.
right, right,
And it's only later in your career when you realize I've made so many mistakes, and there was that time I just like took the entire thing down. Destroyed a data center, like, and you're still here, and you learn from it, and you're here to tell the tale. So showing people that you're still here to tell the tale is really powerful. But yeah, doing all those things that look like psychological safety, admit mistakes, show vulnerability, ask for help, suggest imperfect questions, even maybe intentionally suggest imperfect ideas or unfinished ideas, and let other people build on them.
so
So
provoking,
yeah,
provoke that
provoking.
instant. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, that's what.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, what you reminded me of is there's an example of somebody made a mistake and it was $50,000. And I remember the person was like, "Okay, I'm gonna walk into my boss and get fired." And so the person was very, "Okay, boss, I made this mistake." And the boss goes, "You're gonna fire me?" She couldn't, you know, she couldn't. It
yeah,
was just eating her up inside. She thought for sure she had lost her job. And she asked the question, right? She goes, "Hey, am I still? I'll pack my bags. You can blame me." He goes, "Why am I going to blame you? I just paid $50,000 for you to learn a lesson. Are we going to make that mistake again?" She was like, "No." He goes, "Okay, just don't make it again. That'll be a different conversation. But right now, I just paid for your training. So let's get back to work." And he patched her up. They had a great conversation. And then, let's
yeah,
document why and how, and let's make sure nobody else can make that, and train everybody on this, right? And so
yeah,
that to
yeah,
me is a
yeah,
great
yeah,
story that
yeah,
fits right into what you're talking about.
yeah. Perfect. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're creating a very safe space for people to come to you with big mistakes, and of course we want to hear about the big mistakes, because if they've happened,
Yeah.
we really
Yeah.
want to hear about it. Like, we don't want someone to box it away and pretend it didn't exist.
So, all right. So while we're talking about this, it's just another idea came to mind. So I heard one company, and maybe you can validate that this is out there for others or whatever, but they were talking about how they in their parking lot. So in the parking lot, there's the CEO parking space, and then right next to it is the mistake of the month parking spot. And they had a placard, mistake of the month, right? And there were people competing, not that they did intentional mistakes, right? But
Yeah,
just
yeah,
your lesson learned, and so you get that parking spot for making the mistake that then they trained on. So have you ever heard of that before? Or
yeah. Well, so not that specifically. But that, and I think that's really interesting because you could, when you hear about that, you could definitely interpret that in two different ways. You could interpret that as a punishment, as a way of humiliating people for making mistakes,
okay, yeah,
um, and and trying to avoid mistakes in the future. Like, and this was part of the way I got into psychological safety. Was a long time ago. I had a boss who did that. he would storm into this big open plan office where all us engineers were in. He had his glass cubicle in the corner, and he'd storm in, and then he'd rip someone apart for some minor mistake,
Hmm.
and and of course that meant that everyone was so afraid of making mistakes that everyone was afraid to do anything. You couldn't
Yeah,
move, like
yeah.
you just couldn't do anything. Even just a routine update would require pages and pages of planning and documentation to
Wow.
show that to cover your ass,
Right,
because
right.
it's yeah, and so
Wow.
punishing, yeah,
Wow.
punishing for mistakes results in it can look like it results in fewer mistakes, but it actually only results in the fewer mistakes you hear about. And
Okay.
so, but what you're talking about there, I think, is almost the flip side. We're encouraging talking about mistakes, highlighting mistakes,
Yeah.
sharing, and this is the important point, sharing the learning from those mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's the spotlight behavior. That's the behavior that we want,
Yeah, and
because
that's what this company,
we've
it was all
yeah,
positive. It's
yeah,
nothing
yeah,
negative.
yeah,
This
yeah,
is totally
yeah,
positive. But I just, when
yeah.
I heard that and I said, "Are you sure?" And they go, "Yeah." I said, "Can you give me a picture of that?" So, but yeah, but that was just like
Mm.
first time I heard that one, I was just like, "Wow, okay, that's taking it to the extreme." But I like it. It's
Yeah, yeah. Well,
yeah.
in fact, and it reminds me a lot of. So I heard recently through a friend of mine about a practice at Delta Airlines, who have a lanyard that they give to people that I think it's a safety champion on if they stop a flight or an operation due to some issue or safety concern that they spot. So they're actually rewarding, like holding a plane on the tarmac, or some quite dramatic, like inhibition
Disruption.
of disruption. They're
Yeah,
rewarding
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and what's even more powerful about this, and I love it, is was so there's like the reward, the explicit reward, like thank you, here's the lanyard. What's even more powerful is that in the organization, people are encouraged to, when they see someone wearing this, they're encouraged to go up to the people and say, "Oh, what happened for you to earn that? How did you earn that?" Because and that's really powerful, because that's sharing
Wow.
that learning.
Yeah.
That's spreading it, and that's gaining that momentum, and sort of catalyzing that change across the organization, which is super powerful. That shared learning, yeah.
Yeah, you reminded me of a family joke we have with my daughter. She started as dad, sharing is caring. But that's really what we're talking about here, right? It's just
Yeah, yeah,
it's
it
because we
is.
care about each other. We want everybody to do good in this environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly. We can learn from our mistakes. I can learn from the mistake I made with an auto scaling group, and I brought down production. But if I just hide that mistake, or even don't hide it, but just keep it to myself, like,
Right,
oh, that
right.
was like realizing that that the difference between two tick boxes is minor. So I ticked the wrong one, and brought down production. Well, so if I hide that learning, like I must always make sure to tick that one, not that one.
Yep.
Someone else is probably going to make the same mistake.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas if we have a big open like retro about it, and like look at this screen and then look at these two things and share that learning, we're then the net benefit to the company is huge.
Got it. Got it. So, all right. So, I got one more question for you before we sort of close things out here. So where I want to go with this is for the future leaders, right, in our audience,
Mm.
is you know or leaders that are transitioning. Maybe they're evolving themselves, their skill set. They're going to go in different area, different direction. They're going to try different leadership techniques. Maybe they've been, this style leader for over a decade, and now they're going to transform themselves. Or, I think, anyways, different. What advice do you have or recommendations do you have for folks to help them be successful? How you found success with your career. What advice do you have for them to find success like you have?
So this is really good, because at a foundational level, you can think about psychological safety as really, really closely related to predictability. And so the more we create an environment where people can predict how how their interpersonal reactions and communications will go in that environment, the better, the greater the psychological safety in that environment, and the greater the performance of the team and the people within it. So what I like to suggest to people, everyone, whether you're a leader or not, or whether you're sort of in that transition period, is to use practices like personal user manuals. So personal user
Mhm.
manuals like personal readmes,
Yep,
really really
yep.
powerful as a way to describe how you like to work, what you're good at, what you're working at, and all that stuff that goes in one manual, and share it with other people on the team.
Okay.
As a manager, you can create a manager manual, which is kind of the same thing, but just talks about how you like to manage, what sort of routines and practices and habits and what what's important to you as a manager, as a leader, how you can help other people, all that sort of stuff that you want to put in a document as a manager. All these are living, breathing, evolving documents. They're not set in stone. And at a more macro level, team charters that effectively do the same thing for a team. At a team level, describe the team norms, behaviors, expectations, what's important to us, what's not important to us, what metrics are important, what's our goal, what's our roles, responsibilities, who are the other teams we work with, what do we need from other teams, what do we give to other teams, all of that sort of stuff that goes into a team charter. As a transitioning manager, not only is that a really really powerful discovery exercise because you'll discover loads about the team that you didn't know,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it's a really powerful artifact for then
Wow.
fostering further psychological safety and performance, actual outcomes in the team. So that whole personal user manual, manager manual, team charter, effectively a team manual, that
Wow.
whole set of artifacts, super powerful as a practice and as actual things.
Yeah, it's something tangible, right? It's not.
Yeah, yeah,
It's tangible. We have no
that's it.
appreciate, and it's from our people's own words, right? It's them pouring
Yeah,
themselves out. So
yeah.
great. What I'd like to do is, for our audience out there, I'd like to ask that Jessica's going to be putting a link in the chat there, and if you guys can just provide some feedback for us on, the feed about this show, and even if you've seen past shows, or just provide us some feedback, we'd appreciate that. So, as our time together here at Leaders in Transformation is coming to an end, just want to say thank you for Tom, and as customary on our show, we give you the last word. So Tom, what's the final word of the day of words of wisdom for our audience?
Oh wow. Well, so my word of wisdom is usually it's this is my go to phrase. Um, Everything is an experiment. Make everything an experiment. If you're going to do one thing, change change the way we frame work, change the way we think about work into experiments. Think about what we can learn from what we're doing and how we can do it better next time. And yeah, that's if you're going to take away one thing, make it that.
Wow, excellent, excellent. So thank you again, Tom. So we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of Leaders in Transformation. And remember that our adoptions and transformations are not the destination, but a journey. And the decisions that you, our audience, makes today is going to shape the world for all of us tomorrow. On behalf of Tom, thank you so much for being our guest. This is a lot of fun. Can't wait to explore stuff in the future with you and have some fun there. To our DASA team here at Leaders in Transformation, thank you. And for our audience, thank you for joining us, and look forward to having you in our next episode of Leaders in Transformation as we continue to explore the successful minds of leaders in transformation. Until then, lead well, inspire your team, and don't forget to have some fun in your adoption and transformation.